Body.
Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Love that energy. So today we got Mr. Jon Asher on. John, why don't you go ahead and kind of go over your hurt origin story with us?
Oh, okay, sure. So I've been into reptiles my entire life. My first word was frog, so reptiles and amphibians, but my first word was frog. So it's been a
Love it.
lifelong,
That's
lifelong
awesome.
passion for me. I don't know why. I've just always liked them. Something always appealed to me about reptiles and amphibians and nature in general. But I've been a big reptile guy since I was, very, very little. I can't even tell you how long time. I'm 22, so as long as that. Um, and I've done a lot of stuff with reptiles throughout my life. Like when I was a kid, I would always have the reptile birthday parties where they would come and bring animals to your party, and I lived near underground reptiles, so it was always them. And
All right.
then I live in Florida, which is the capital for all things
Reps.
reptile, pretty much. So I've
Oh
grown up
yeah.
catching anoles, catching black racers, catching iguanas, and all kinds of things like that. So it goes way back for me. Yeah.
Nice.
Awesome. So, how did you
So
start this endeavor? How did you get into the Knolls? What made you start this whole little
Well,
path now?
oh, okay. So it must have been. It's over 10 years ago. I saw I think it was a female small wood eye in the store over at what's called Cold Blooded Kingdom now, but it used to be the Jungle, and then it was Ben Siegel Reptiles before that. And they had one in the cage, and I was like, I just thought it was very interesting and it was cool. And I was young, so I saw that, and then I didn't think about them that much. And then I was a couple years back. I'm thinking to myself. Uh, I wanted to get into some projects, and I've always really liked anoles. Obviously, like I was saying, I kind of grew up around them, and I thought to
Mhm.
myself, "Oh, I remember that cool lizard I saw way back when, small wood eye. That was a cool one." So and that's kind of what brought me back into anoles, and I got some small wood eye early on. Really liked them, and just kind of got lucky and got a bunch of other stuff and expanded. And they also they really do well here, so
right.
it's a good thing for me to have here. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just right checking out your page before and doing some, research, refreshing on the species in general, and I was blown away with how many species actually live in Florida now. I mean, I suppose they're not native there, but there was something like the guy was showing on the video, like 11 species of different types of anoles that have set up shop down in Florida.
Yeah, I think now there's only 8 that are established, and then there
Okay.
was another 3 that were previously established. So we have brown anoles, Anoles sagrii, your native Carolina green anole, Carolinensis, and then we have the bark anoles, Disticus,
Mhm.
uh, Hispaniolan green anole, which was Chlorocyanus and was recently reassigned to something else. There's a whole paper about it. The Hispaniolan large-headed anole, Cybotes, obviously Equestris is 6. The night anole, that's 6. And then who am I missing? Disticus, gosh, Chrysotellus, Sagrii. I guess I might be like for totally blanking on one, but I guess there's 6 established. And then we used to have the Jamaican giant Anolis scarmani and Anolis triniatus at like the St. Vincent bush anole, and I think there was one other that used to be established and isn't anymore. So yeah, there's a bunch of anoles down here, all kinds of
Yeah, so
different
they
things
do
here.
well then, huh?
Yeah, really well, really well. All of them, pretty much any Caribbean anole here is going to thrive. Any generalist, yeah.
Nice. All right. Hey, Ant, go ahead and keep on doing talking real quick. I need to
How
change
do you
something
how do
on
you
the
feel about
YouTube.
that? How do you feel from someone that keeps them, in captivity, in I guess studies and researches the hobby? How do you feel about the wild populations down there with them being labeled invasive, or how do you feel about the whole topic?
Uh, well, you know, I don't mind it personally. I think brown anoles at this point are, if you're going to call a feral hog native, you might as well call a brown anole native. They've been here since the 1870s, maybe even longer than that. They're all over the state. They're widespread. Their environmental impact is, they say that they outcompete the green anoles, which to some extent is probably true. But if you think about it, green anoles, the lineage for green anoles originates in Cuba, and brown anoles are from Cuba. And in Cuba, the green anoles naturally compete with brown anoles. So to some extent, the Carolinensis here, the green anoles are able to kind of just reconform to their original niche of living higher up in the trees and coexist with the brown anoles. So I'm pretty cool with the brown anoles. crested anoles are kind of brutal a little bit because they outcompete the brown anoles. Which if you outcompete a brown anole, you got to be pretty gnarly. But they don't really spread at the same rate the brown anoles do. It seems like they're pretty localized in Miami. I like them. I obviously love seeing equestris here. You know, I'll never complain about it. But I think labeling them as invasive is a strong statement because we really don't understand the impact of night anoles on the ecosystem. We really don't have a great understanding of them because I don't think there's enough work done on actually studying what's going on with, because night anole is first of all, a night anole is a big anole predator. So anywhere that brown anoles and night anoles exist, they're eating a lot of brown anoles if they can. But I do personally believe that their impact on the ecosystem is minimal here, and also considering the fact that those anoles, all of the non-native anoles here, really only live around developed or previously developed areas. If you go out in the Everglades and big cypress, all you're going to see are green anoles. Really, in my experience, at least, I could be wrong, but in my experience, pretty much all of those non-native species only live around humans. So I like them here, and I don't think that they're doing much to harm the environment. Actually, I think even the brown anoles might even help some of our native animals by being a food source.
Imagine they keep the mosquitoes, at bay as much as you can down there. Mosquitoes and gnats and all types of small stuff.
They're not doing a very good job.
So I was talking to somebody one time, right? And it was an interesting conversation because somebody had brought up the topic of invasive species and anoles being invasive, and he had brought up the idea that how do you call them invasive when we're not exactly sure that it was humans that introduced them here? They could have come over on drifting piles of palm fronds and stuff from Cuba. They could have come here whether humans existed or not existed in theory. These animals get around and have naturally spread out in the Caribbean through natural events anyways, hurricanes, tsunamis, blah blah. So it's one of those weird things where I guess green iguanas. I don't even know that we can say that you can really blame humans for green iguanas or say that they wouldn't ever come here. I mean, if you look at alligators, for example, alligators it's a known fact that they're traveling north, right? Like they're traveling north every year. The planet gets a little warmer, and alligators found a little more north of Florida. Why wouldn't it have happened naturally? I mean, it's a possibility. I mean, dinosaurs covered the continent. They didn't start in one spot. I'm not a fan of the kill all invasive camp. I mean, if they're living and they set up shop and they're fitting in, I mean, leave them alone. You're invasive too, right? Like, damn. I mean, human beings leave the things alone.
Yeah, that it's an interesting topic. I do agree with you. I think there are certain things that should be labeled as invasive and certain things that should keep the non-native label. As far as a natural introduction of anoles goes, I know that there is some study that links sagrii to cargo, Anoles sagrii, the Cuban brown anole, to cargo transports. And you also have to keep in mind that the brown anole is also native to the Bahamas, and it's native to Bimini, which is actually about 50 miles off the coast of Palm Beach. So they say there's multiple introductions from multiple populations and whatever. But they totally in the span of many years into the future, they totally could have ended up here because the green anoles did. And sagrii I call it sagrii, but a brown anole is a better name, I guess. Brown anole is a master interoceanic traveler and a master of survival. Master of survival. Yes. Yeah. Very good for it.
Jason, we watched a study. There was a report, those guys, I'm sure you've seen it, but these guys, a biologist and this girl, did a study on one of these species of anoles in the Caribbean, and they were showing how fast they actually adapted to living in like a urban civilization, I guess. Like they showed how fast the toes grew over like a generation. They just showed how the species of anole adapted to human influence, in comparison to a time frame, I guess. Like it was super interesting how fast they were able to adapt to a new environment. Like literally the animal changed.
Literally, they got bigger, faster, stronger.
Yeah,
I think that was.
Yeah, that was Jonathan Lassos, I'm pretty sure, and one of his PhD students. He's like he's the big anole guru in the in the science world. And I know that there was that one study, and I forget. You're right. It was a woman,
It was in
and
Puerto
she
Rico.
had, yeah, it was about anoles adapting to urban environments. And then there was
Mhm.
another study that they did where they introduced brown anoles on like tiny little islands with little vegetation, like very low shrubby vegetation, and they would notice that they would adapt certain. I forget the exactly what they would how they would adapt, but they would adapt to the islands like with little vegetation over 2 or 3 generations, and one trait would be selected for, and you could see that trait being selected for over like only 3 or 4 generations, which is huge and crazy for evolution.
I think
And
it's amazing.
yeah, that's why anoles are such an important study subject
Yeah,
for in terms of studying evolution, studying adaptive radiation, because they have a short generation time and they can adapt very quickly. So
make a
that's
great
that,
test subject.
and back to why I love anoles. That's another thing is I love science, and I really am
Me
interested
too.
in evolution, and I love the topic of adaptive radiation, and it's there. Caribbean anoles specifically are a fascinating uh, study subject, or not study,
Yeah.
fascinating topic in that area. Fascinating topic, one of the best.
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you currently keeping everything outside, or do you got like a certain ratio that you keep outside to inside?
So I pretty much all of the adults live outside and they get natural sun. They don't have any lighting on them or anything. They just live
Okay.
outside. They get sun. This time of year, it's a lot more shady, less direct sun.
Yeah.
I wish it was more sun this time of year and less sun in the summer. But I work with what I'm given. And then
Right. Yeah.
I have all of the juveniles and then some small species kind of in it. I call it it's indoor outdoor. It's a lanai, like a screened in patio. So they're
Oh, okay.
outside,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
they're under UVB and heat
Okay.
and UVA and stuff like that. So
And what are the behaviors between the ones that are getting that real sun to the ones that are getting the UVB?
it's to be honest, it's very similar.
Okay.
Because I'm keeping them outside, they all kind of are exposed to very similar environmental conditions. And
Okay.
even though the ones kept under UV are, they don't get direct sunlight. For the most part, the anoles are indirect baskers. They will open bask 100% in the times of the year when it's cool. But for the most part, they're either doing like a cryptic basking where they stick a leg or a tail or part of their body out for a
Okay.
little sun, or in the summer, they don't bask at all pretty much, or only in the
Mm.
very early morning. So I would say they act very similar. The behaviors are identical. The colors and whatever in the animals is identical. In my experience, it just seems like a big part of getting them to thrive is just keeping them outside in Florida. Period. Because it's very humid. They get
Absolutely.
the natural seasonal changes. That we're not far from
Absolutely.
Cuba. We're not far from the Bahamas. So yeah, I would
Absolutely.
say it's about the same.
Are you using screen enclosures? You using the Repta breezes?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I am a big backer of Reptibreezes. I love them. They're great. They're multifunctional. You can use them for all kinds of different things. You can do all kinds of different things with them. They're made out of aluminum, which is nice because I live next to the ocean, so I'm constantly getting
Mhm.
salty sea breeze. So any
Nice.
steel would go to crap really quick. But yeah, I love Reptibreezes.
Yeah, I got a big old 4x2x2 myself. I had an iguana in it. Now I'm
Nice.
looking for something else to keep in that thing. I take it outside in the summertime and put my bearded dragons in and let them hang out and just put all types of stuff outside. I mean, they're the perfect. They're perfect. They are, like you said, freaking powder coated aluminum. They're awesome.
Yeah, they're great. You need some anoles maybe.
I
Right.
listen. I'm 40. I'm 41. I just turned 41 years old. One of from people in my era, from the 80s that started keeping reptiles in the 80s. You're not going to meet many people that didn't have one. They were our first go-to reptile in the pet store. You had options of green iguanas, your green anoles, maybe leopard geckos. I mean, that's what it was. They were the first pet your parent would buy you. You were getting an anole or maybe a tokay gecko, or it's funny because all these things are coming back into popularity now that were in the 80s. So it's super
Well,
cool to see.
everything
I mean,
cycles through, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
but
and it's funny that you mentioned that because I know this is a little off topic, but that kind of the fact that an Anole is everyone's first pet, and that's
mm,
something that I run into a lot. Is people have a hard time understanding that not everything is a green Anole and not everything is a
mhm,
brown Anole. So that's a stigma that
yeah,
I work really hard to kind of make people
yeah,
understand. Like we're there's 400 Oh, I know there's 65 species of anole in Cuba alone, 41 in DR.
Wow.
I think
I did not
11 in
know that.
11 in Puerto Rico, 7 in Jamaica, and hundreds in Central and South America and in the Lesser Antilles a
Wow.
bunch. Yeah, my
I did
numbers might
not
be a
know
little
that.
off. Yeah, there's over 400. I think over 450 species of anole. So people think
Really?
anole and they immediately think green anole, brown anole. They
Oh
might
yeah,
think
yeah.
crested anole, but they don't realize that the diversity is huge. I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure Anoles is the largest tetrapod genus, at least maybe the largest terrestrial animal genus, Anoles.
That's awesome. That's
Amazing.
amazing.
Yeah, and there's some debate with that genus if something should be reclassified into their own subgenuses. But right now,
Mhm.
the agreed upon phylogeny is it's an anole, it's Anoles,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Okay. Do you have a favorite species of the 450 said species?
I have a few.
Yeah.
And so are you? Well, before we get into that, are you familiar with how the Caribbean anole species are kind of classified into an ecomorph? It's like a certain like morphotype of. So pretty much, I'll explain this really quick, but this
Please.
ties into what you asked me. So we were talking about anoles being a great example of adaptive radiation, and some really how the Caribbean species all have a really interesting evolutionary history. So I'll do my best to explain this. So pretty
Please, yeah.
much when you look at the 4 big islands in the Caribbean, so that's Cuba, Jamaica, Hispaniola, which is DR and Haiti, and Puerto Rico, you see a lot of anoles that look similar. Same body type, same color, same niche-ish. So the assumption way back when was like, okay, this anole is green and lives this high up in the trees. It's probably related to the one island over that does the same thing, right? That would be the immediate assumption. But the thing that's fascinating about anoles is instead of all of the different ones that do the same thing being related, they did this thing called, just like a good example of this is Darwin's finches. They did adaptive radiation. It's niche partitioning where instead of all of the anoles that are doing the same thing on each island being related, every anole per island is more closely related to each other than they are to the island over. So say I don't know how familiar you are with species, but so if you look at like a green anole, like your Cuban green anole, and then you look at the Puerto Rican green anole, or the Dominican Republic green anole that we have here, Chlorocyanus. If you look at them next to each other, you might not be able to tell the difference. Like they're very, very similar looking species.
Yeah.
But the green anole on Cuba is more closely related to a night anole than it is to that very similar looking green species on a different island. So basically, all of the anoles on a per island basis in the 4 big islands of the Caribbean radiated out from a few common ancestors on that island, rather than them all evolving to like the same anoles just drifting and evolving on different islands. Does that make sense? They
It does.
evolved.
It does. I
Adaptive
watched Clint's
radiation.
Reptiles. He just went on. He did this. Clint, follow. Do you watch Clint's Reptiles videos? He just did the whole phylogeny of lizards in general, and he goes on to it. But there's a name for it, and I don't know exactly what it is. But animals in different locations can ultimately evolve to become the same type of thing or similar types of things from same animals. I forgot the name that he used, the
It's convergent.
scientific term.
It's convergent evolution. That's what it is. It's convergent evolution.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah, I probably should have said that. Yeah. So yeah, anoles in the big 4 big islands are they did adaptive radiation out from one common ancestor, and adaptive radiation is basically it's niche partitioning. It's where one or two or a small group of common ancestors adapts to occupy many different niches. And the reason it's so fascinating is because it's convergent evolution on a small scale. So it's convergent evolution between each island. So like on I think like a great example is Cuba. Like Cuba has the most anole species of all the Caribbean islands. You have anoles like a brown anole that stay near the bottom of the trees, and they call it this is what I was getting into, the ecomorphs. They call it a trunk ground because it kind of occupies the trunk and the ground, and then you go one up, and Cuba actually only has one. There's only 2 true bark species in the whole Caribbean, and Cuba has one of them. But the most commonly known bark species is the bark anole disticus. Those are like, one up. They kind of occupy the wide trees. They conform to the bark. And then you go one up from that, and you have something called like a trunk crown, which is what like Anoles grami, the blue anole from Jamaica, the turquoise anole. That's kind of what that's considered. In Cuba, one that you would call a trunk crown is like Allisoni, you know, like the blue-headed green
Okay.
anole.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then you have twig anoles, which are like they have very like
know that.
proportionally short limbs, and they walk on very thin branches and live in the canopy usually. Anoles valenciani, which is one of my favorite anoles in the whole world, is a twig anole. But you have all kinds of different twig anoles, and then you have the crown giant, which is uh, my reptile name, and also that's basically the ecomorph of the giant anoles of the giant green anoles. So like you have Equestris, Garmani, Baleatus, Barahone, Ricordae, Cuvieri, and the extinct Roosevelti in that niche. And then you have like a grass bush also. That's one that I'm missing because I don't really keep any of them, but that's one that kind of occupies like, you know, shrubs and grasses. And then you have, you know, there's some like random offshoot ones like Cameliolis, like the Cuban false chameleons. They call that a twig giant, a twig
Oh,
giant.
really?
But to me, it's more of a crown. It's more of a crown giant. That is to me at least. But they do definitely walk on twigs more than a Equestris does. But yeah, that's sorry. I don't know if I made that really confusing. I hope that made
No,
sense.
not at all,
Oh no,
man.
no.
I love your passion, man. Your
I
passion
love
is
hearing this stuff,
glowing,
man.
bro. It's glowing.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're here like we're kind of talking about kind of like the differences between like the Jamaicans and the Cubans, right? Because I know you said that like you like the Jamaican twigs and then
Yes.
also a lot of those Cuban ones. So can you kind of like talk about the differences between each of their habitats, right? And like how would people go about setting them up? Um, like if they wanted to get like a Jamaican twig or if they wanted to get like a small wood eye.
Yeah, sure, I got you. Really quick though, I do want to get back to you, Anthony. I went on a really big tangent. My absolute favorite anole species, top three for me, definitely like Anoles valenciani, the Jamaican twig anole. Like I have such a soft spot for them, and I absolutely love them. Uh, Smallwood eye, just because like that's my OG, and probably Guamahaya because I just have a big history with them, and they're a really exciting project for me. But I'll move
Awesome.
past that. So you were
Awesome.
asking me what, so setting up the differences.
Just
Well,
the differences in husbandries between some of your
yeah.
favorite species.
So we can start with the Cuban giant species. So like the Cuban giants are like smallwood eye, Baracoa, Luteoglaris, Equestris, uh, and then a Noblei, which is like kind of an obscure one that we don't really have much of in the hobby, and then Pygma Equestris, which is like a really obscure one that we don't have in the hobby. And there's a ton of subspecies of each. So for setting them up, they're pretty similar. Like it's pretty fluid, like for all of the species we have in the hobby. Like, you know, we have the Blue Beauties, we have Luteoglaris, Smallwood Eye, Baracoa, normal Equestris from Florida. It's pretty fluid. I think that minimum size enclosure for a pair, and this is like absolute minimum. I mean, you could probably get away with housing a pair of, you know, adult size animals in a 3 by 18 by 18, but it's not ideal. That's not ideal. A 3 by 3 by 18, like those big wide exoterras, are more ideal for
Okay,
them.
yeah, yeah.
If you're keeping in glass, I keep in screens, and I have a certain way of keeping that I can explain after. But as far as just general setup things, uh, you know, it's a crown giant, so you just kind of gotta conform to what a crown giant likes, and a crown giant likes thick branches. Crown giant likes, you know, so every enclosure that I have those giant anoles in, I always try to add like one like trunk size branch, like a thick branch. They really love oak wood. That's like something I've noticed even in the wild Equestris series. You see a lot of Equestris on oak trees, but they'll use any kind of wood. I use ficus wood and gumbo limbo wood, and I try to use multiple different kinds of wood per enclosure. They like some
Nice.
thick branches. They like to sit head down vertically on branches, and they like different size branches. So that's just like very basic. You know, you
Mhm.
want to have many different size branches, and you want to have a lot of different horizontal and vertical perches because they will really use all of it. I've noticed that they like leaf surfaces. They'll walk on leaf surfaces. The crown giant species have enlarged toe pads, obviously for helping them kind of navigate through the canopy. So big leaf surfaces. The more airflow you can do, the better. You can totally get away with keeping them in glass. People are successful with keeping them in glass. In my book, screen is better, but not everybody lives in Florida.
Yeah.
So yeah. Um, UVA, you know, they do like light. They live in the top of the trees, you know, even if they're sitting under the leaves, there's a lot of light up there.
Mhm.
So I use like shop lights, Archipelago shop lights. They're like $20. You can get them at Lowe's or Tractor Supply. You can order them online. They really work well. They're hardy. They're water resistant. They're good. I think I use UV, obviously strips, no compacts, please. I use 10.0 strips. I think with 10.0 strips, if you're going to use them, you just got to really make sure that you're not going to let the animals get too close to them, because I've had an experience in the past with this thing called photokeratoconjunctivitis, where the anoles, they'll get too close to the lights and it'll almost like it scorches their corneas, and you'll see them like closing their eyes a lot. It's a reversible condition. But so I learned that through experience. If you're going to use a 10.0, you can't have them getting too close to it. But obviously that's just a general thing that is known. But at least a 5.0. I use a 5.0 for babies and 10.0 for bigger stuff, as long as they have a decent size enclosure. I'm just thinking if I'm missing anything. That's like caging wise for the Cuban giant stuff. And Jamaican stuff is pretty similar. So Jamaican crown giant, like Garmani, is pretty similar, like size requirement wise, perches wise. They like it hot. The Jamaican stuff, they all like it hot. Any Caribbean anole, except for Montane stuff, likes it hot. But Garmani likes it like, they'll be happy in 95. They like it hot. I've been to Jamaica and it's freaking hot shit there. So
yeah, that's what I was gonna say, because I know it has to be different temperature. Like Cuba, I'm sure Cuba's probably like 80s, 90s, but I know Jamaica.
Cuba's hot as shit, dude. Yeah, no,
they're all pretty close to the equator.
Yeah,
all of talking like temps wise.
All of the climates on all of those 4 big Caribbean islands are very similar at sea level. Obviously, there's different elevations on every island, so the higher up you go, the cooler it gets. Yeah. Cuba summertime sea level, same as it is in hotter than Miami. So hot. Jamaica, same thing, really hot. Any coastal area is hot, but if you go in Jamaica, you go up in the blue. Yeah. Well, during the day in the summer, it's going to be below 50%, just because the sun is just so strong. But at night, humid. But it's just at the same time in Jamaica, you can go up in the Blue Mountains and get down into in the 60s and the 50s. Cuba, you can go to Sierra Maestra, the Guamajaya Massif, and 60s, 50s. I've been up in a pretty decently high place in East Cuba, and even in the middle of the summer, it's like 60s there at night. So
really?
There are places in Dominican Republic, Duarte, over 10,000 feet where it freezes over actually sometimes, like not like fully like iced up, but it'll freeze over for mornings sometimes, like real cold. I don't think there's any animals up there. But yeah, no, Jamaica, to get back to it, very similar to keeping the Cuban species. In my experience, though, with Garmani, they can be very hyper. The males especially are very hyper animals. Actually, that's the one species of anole that I think might be better in a glass cage, because I've had bad experiences with the males just beating the crap out of their faces on the screen. Even though, these are, I literally have hatched these things out, and they hatch small. And I've raised them from babies to adults. They're tame animals that'll tongue feed tame. I don't handle them, but they're tame animals that'll tongue feed, and they'll sit out and look at me, and then they just get riled up one day. They hit their face once, and then they just don't stop doing it. And I've had a problem with that. So now I'm like, but they do well in glass. Everyone I know that keeps them in glass, they stay perfect. So that's for the crown giant stuff. I have kept the Dominican Republic crown giants too, but I won't even really talk about them because they're very shy, and they didn't like my keeping. Well, I don't know if it was that or if they were just very, very shy and it aggravated me. But
I got 2 questions for you, John. Your lights, one, are you keeping your strips right on the screen, or are you suspending them? And then also, have you had any issues with their nails getting stuck in the screens at all?
That's a great question. So yes, I do keep the lights right up against the screen, because the way that I kind of keep them on those metal shelving units. You know what I'm talking about? Those
bigger racks?
Yeah, exactly what you had behind you. Yeah. So I keep them on those so the lights are right on top of them. Very minimal on the nails getting stuck, but something I have had is where they'll scratch at the screen. If I'll observe them scratching at the screen, and they can wear their nails down or kind of like misshape their nails, but really not much with their nails getting stuck in the screens. They're pretty agile and good at not doing that.
Cool. Yeah. Would you get a question in the chat? They're asking about some invasives, so I doubt it, but I don't know. But are there any beauty anoles invasive in Florida?
No Anoles sequestris portior here.
Okay. Which one's that? That's not the blue night anoles?
Yeah,
I was just watching a guy on YouTube caught one in Florida.
A podior?
I
Nah,
guess it had a big blue head on it. It's a big. He's got his mouth gaping open. He ran and caught it. I thought he called it a blue beauty or something.
sometimes people on the internet don't know what they're talking about. So I promise you,
Could very well be.
there is no Anoles, Equestris, Podior, Blue Beauties here. There are, though. We do have night anoles here, like Central
Yeah.
Cuban night anole, general.
That's probably what it was then, just a regular old night anole.
Probably a regular old night anole. And a lot of the time, people will confuse night anoles and blue beauties, and not really understand the difference. And a blue beauty is.
I don't. There's so many species. Every time I look at one, I'm like, that looks like that, and that looks like that. Ain't it the same thing? It must be a morph name or a something. I'm like, I can't keep up with them all.
A blue beauty is just it's an insular subspecies of night anole. So there's a small archipelago of islands. It's not very small. It's actually pretty big in central Cuba, and each of the islands, or not all of them, but a lot of the islands have their own unique subspecies of night anole. So the blue beauties are just a subspecies from a small island called Cayo Santa Maria, and they only come from that spot. I've actually been there. I've been there. I've been there. I've seen a ton of them in the wild. They're very common there.
That's why they're expensive, right? Aren't they a fairly expensive? No.
Yeah, fairly. They were very expensive when they first came into the hobby 3 or 4 years ago, and they're very prolific. I just found a baby for mine today. I find them all the time.
Oh, yeah. I think I see Ron St. Pierre. Ron St. Pierre had him, I think. Somebody had him. I watched somebody a few years ago had him, and they were.
Yeah, they came into the country from Czech Republic. I'm pretty sure they came to Randy Mopia first. Yeah, the Europeans, they get all the cool stuff first. But they went to Randy Mopia, and then Ron bought some of the founder group from Randy Mopia, and then kind of distributed that. Ron and another guy named David Aldi in Eclectic Reptiles. He also got some of that original founder group, and they kind of distributed them. All over the place, and now they're relatively common. They're super cool, though. They're cool. They're a good species. I have a soft spot for them because I've seen them in the wild, and it's trippy to see them because they're just so bright and beautiful. I love them.
I can imagine.
I will tell you that they're my least favorite of all the giant anoles, but I still love them.
Why is that? Attitude?
Mine are really cool. Actually, they'll eat out of your fingers and come up to the front of the cage, and they're obviously really beautiful. But Equestris, night anoles, aka Equestris, they are very, you have Barracoa, small wood eye, much more placid. Like they're much more slow moving, not so quick to run and freak out. When you have an Equestris species like that, their Equestris is fast and they run and they keep you on your feet. The Equestris species do. Like, when I open the cages with the babies to feed the babies and a blue beauty gets out, I'm like, oh no.
Yeah, that guy's a suck doing it outside when once they get out, you're like, oh shit.
No, they don't get. No, the babies are in the screen patio, so they don't go far.
Yeah, I was saying the screen patio. I'd let a couple out.
The adults don't ever leave their cages. Actually, it's funny. My adults, you could leave their cages open forever, and I don't think they would ever leave.
You know what? That actually kind of happened to me this weekend.
Me too.
I left my Sycorae cage open since Friday. And then I didn't get back to my place until Sunday, like Sunday afternoon. Came in there, check on everybody. I'm like, oh shit. Looked in there, just chilling. I'm like, okay, you just didn't want to leave at all. They're like, you're comfortable. You're good.
Yeah, exactly. That's always a good sign. Some of my anoles will take it one step further. And if you go in their cage, they'll actually attack you and tell you to
get out. Well, that's even better. Shit, I like that.
Yeah.
So since we're on the topic of this kind of, how handleable are they? I've listened to some videos and watched some guys argue with each other about how they're unhandleable, and then someone will say, well, actually, I hold mine all the time. I mean, what do you suggest and recommend with your experience for someone that's looking to get, a species of anoles, one better to handle than others? Are they just totally off limits? What's your stance on the topic of handling anoles?
Don't handle them.
Well, look, but don't touch.
Okay. You said, are some better than others? Yeah. Absolutely, 100%. If you're getting a blue beauty, don't handle it. I'm telling you right now, it's not going to work out for you handling a blue beauty. Or any Equestris for that matter, they don't want to be handled. Like I was saying, Equestris is a much more reactive, much more hyper species than smallwood eye or barracuda. Don't handle blue beauties. Don't handle equestris. If you're handling them and they're sitting still and being calm, it's because they're stressed. I promise. I've dealt with a lot of them. It's best to give that, just like anyone who you talk to about interacting with reptiles will tell you, you can't be going and grabbing them and picking them up and stuff. You got to interact with them on their own time. If you tongue feed them and they walk on your hand, so be it. But as soon as they walk on your hand, if you take them out of the cage, they're still not going to like that. If you want to touch them, you got to bring them on you, let them come on your fingers, and just keep your hand still. Keep feeding them and let them go off. I don't recommend handling them. So I have Anoles barracuda, which is one from Eastern Cuba, one of the 3 from Eastern Cuba. So that one, I have a male and a couple of his offspring girls, and they can be really quite handleable, honestly. I'm not going to tell you they want to be handled. I'm not going to tell you they're a crested gecko, because that's just an absurd comparison, and they're nothing even compare. Like, you can't even compare them. Actually, I think a great comparison for giant anoles is tokays.
Okay.
Think of a tokay. You can interact with it. You can have fun with it. You might have some that'll let you touch them, but it's not something you're going to want to pull out all the time. But back to barracuda. So yeah, I have one adult male barracuda called Spots, and he's a really just a stunning, amazing animal. And he's a 2018 animal, and he is really kind of tame as can be. You can go in the cage and scoop him, and he'll hang out with you. And you can just I take him out, and in the morning, and I'll put him on the lawn chair and let him hit the sun, and he just sits there, and he doesn't leave. And if you bring food to him, he'll run up to you, even out of the cage. That's how you know he's not stressed. He'll run up to you and eat out of your fingers, and he's really calm. And I have some of his offspring too, females, that are really calm, and they can be calm. But when I'm shipping animals to people, I always tell them, like, even if you're getting barracuda, like the tamest of all the night anoles, barracuda, still don't handle them, because it's all about progress, and it's all about gaining trust. If you get an animal, any species pretty much, and you immediately go to handling it and bothering it, it's not going to like you ever. And anoles are smart. Giant anoles are smart. They look at you in a kind of way where you're like, oh, like, you're thinking about this, aren't you? So yeah, don't, pretty much, if you're asking me, with the green ones and pretty much all anoles, it's just don't handle them. Don't handle them until you really get to know them very well, and then you can make your own decision if it's going to be a good idea to handle them. Or you can try it one time and see how it goes, because it probably won't go well. There you go.
Nice. So is there any what was I gonna say? Is there any different kind of dietary differences with them? Being so they're so hot, because I know some of those do take they'll take some of the crested gecko diet. Is that more of the montane species, or is that all species in general?
So the giant anoles, like the Cuban ones, we're talking a lot about the Cuban giants. I'll talk a little bit about the Jamaican ones too, and like some of the smaller species. They will totally take gecko diet as juveniles a lot. Like, they love it. I feel like the bigger they get, the less motivated they become to eat gecko diet, and they kind of, I'm gonna have to go get a charger in a second, by the way. And they kind of start to come to really like to eat insects and other anoles. They do eat some fruit. I won't deny that, but I don't feed mine fruit, because I don't think that feeding them the fruit that you're getting at the grocery store is beneficial to them. It's a personal thing. But I've been to Cuba, and I live in Florida. I see equestris all the time, and they, when they're eating fruits, they're eating palm berries and Brazilian pepper berries, things that are very low meat to seed ratio. They're not eating bananas. They're not eating, watermelon or any of these very high in sugar, low in seeds, fruits, So I fed them palm berries. They forage them. And also, I think another thing that people don't realize is the Anoles sequestris, like the Florida Cuban night anoles, they eat fruit a lot. They do, I'll admit it. But it's kind of just because in my book, it's just kind of because they don't really have a choice. We don't have the kind of insect diversity here, anything like what Cuba has. I mean, Cuba has all kinds of bugs, So here they eat, I feel like they eat fruit almost out of desperation. And obviously they would rather eat an insect any day, or obviously another anole. That is their favorite. But
yeah, so I've seen a lot of that, actually.
Yeah.
So what about so what kind of feeders are you doing? What kind of like how varied of a diet are you giving them? Do you do like snails or anything like that with them?
Yeah. I just want to backtrack really quick. The small species, some of them, especially Jamaican twig anoles, totally do like to lick sap off of fruit. So like mango
Okay.
and pretty much, papaya, anything that produces
Okay.
sap.
Nice.
They love gecko diet, and pretty much any green anole-ish species. So like Alisoni, Porcatus,
Hmm.
Carolinensis, Chlorocyanus, those all will eat a lot of fruit stuff for sure,
Okay.
for sure,
Cool.
for sure. Onto varying my diets. So I breed a lot of discoid roaches. Uh, that is that and the banded crickets are probably the staple diet in my collection. We haven't really talked at all about the camelliolus, the Cuban false chameleon stuff, but I have a lot of them. That's like some of my main work is with the red throat ones and Guamahaya and Porcus and the less common ones. The common one is Barbatus, but
Oh,
I
cool.
work a
That's
lot with the
always
less
I
common
want to get
ones.
into it. I when
And
we were
yeah,
talking about handling them, those are the ones I kept thinking of. Is people I've seen people holding those, but
Yeah.
I didn't want to sound like an idiot. I'm like, I'm pretty damn sure Cuban false chameleon isn't a knoll, but like, let me not sound like a moron here because I don't know the scientific name, so I just shut
you're
up.
not an idiot. No, you're not an idiot at all. Those, I mean, I would say Barbatus is more handleable, and the Guamahaya, which is relatively similar to Barbatus, is definitely handleable. But if I don't have I have one female Barbatus, but I don't really handle any anoles. Like I said, I just know they don't like it
Yeah.
for the most part. But yeah, I collect snails for them. I do. We actually have an invasive snail here that is from Cuba, the Cuban brown snail. That's like their favorite food in the whole world, dude. They crunch those
Okay.
things into bits.
The
They
land
love them.
snail?
Yeah,
Is it a land
it's a
snail?
land snail. It's
I
a
use
land snail.
snails too. That's curious. We got to talk later because I'm curious about that. I'm looking for some other snails too. I feed glass snails and milk snails to my chihuahuas, to my leachianas, to my new cal stuff. But I'm not sure that they're the right type of snails, you know. So that's conversation for another time. But that's cool to know that because I might.
They're nice. The Cuban brown snails are nice, and when they're young, they have a very soft shell, and they get pretty big.
Mhm.
They get about the size of like a $50 coin.
Yeah.
Uh, So, and I also collect. Some people might not like to hear this, but I'll say it because it's a big part of what I do. I do collect anoles to feed to them. I do that in the
I mean, you
summer
say they
and the
eat them,
spring.
so it doesn't matter,
Oh,
right?
they more than eat
That's
them.
fine.
They more than
Yeah.
eat them. They destroy them.
It's
But
part of their
I don't do
natural
I
diet.
don't I
So
it is part of their natural diet. And I don't do it because I like seeing things die. I feel, I'm empathetic towards animals. I love brown anoles. I love Puerto Rican crested anoles, but I really love to see my captive animals thrive. And I think that feeding a giant anole other anoles it's a very enriching experience for them because you'll see when you feed them other anoles, they have a certain hunting tactic for the smaller anoles that you don't see with insects and you don't see with anything else. They'll kind of like they look at it and with an insect they see it, they'll creep up and then just go. But when they see a small anole, they go and they see it, they just slowly turn their head. And once they're looking at it, they slowly open their mouth and then they just go like a freaking arrow, like beeline right on that thing. And they're good at hunting them. They're good at hunting them. I know I have a really good amazing friend who's a biologist in Cuba, and he told me the young crown giants tend to eat a lot of other anoles. But I've seen anole, even the smaller species will eat anoles. I've seen Garmani, the Jamaican giant, eat anoles. Anoles valenciani, the Jamaican twig anole, does totally eat other anoles. Like I hatch out a lot of random little anoles that I'll just leave in the cage with them and let them hunt them. I think it's really enriching for them to eat other anoles. And also, what could possibly be a better nutritional like
Awesome.
thing for what could have better nutritional value for them than something that is essentially everything they already need, you know?
So much more natural than feeding them pinkies or mice or
Yeah,
it's all day you're doing the right thing, man. Screw what anybody thinks. I mean, you're doing what's good for your animal. People have this whole misconception. So I feed my leachianus geckos. That's what they're eating in the wild, dude. I'm not going to feed them a mouse. I'm not feeding
yeah,
them something that's natural. I'm going to feed them a whole food source. There's nothing that's going to be a whole food source. And what are the options? You know, I hate to say it, but in New Caledonia, probably crested gecko, right? Crested gecko is going to
yeah.
crawl into the wrong tree hollow and get knocked off by a 300-pound lychee. It's going to happen, you know?
yeah. No, yeah, for sure. And also on the subject of mice, I just want to mention, I don't. I really recommend against feeding giant anoles any kind of mice or rodents. Those kind of things can give them. If you feed them a lot of that stuff, it will cause gout in them, and it will give them some real issues. I've almost never fed any rodents to my anoles ever, except two times. Two times I have had extra pinks where I'm just like, all right, I need to do something with it, and they eat them. But I do not recommend feeding them that stuff. You're better off feeding them button quail. If you're,
I was just gonna say quail. That's my next go-to. I don't feed rodents, man. It's either lizards or quails, man. I'm not. It's just not natural. I don't care what anyone tells me, what anyone thinks. I could care less about your opinions. If my animals are thriving, that's what matters to me. Not what Joe Schmo that's over here keeping. It's just not my concern, man. This is what they eat, and not to steal the mic or anything. But I was watching videos before this when a guy was, I don't know where he was, but he was filming an anole. This anole bolted out of the tree, was on the bottom of the tree. I don't know what species it was, a bigger anole, and came down and hammered this mourning gecko that was on the ground somewhere, like literally on film as he's just filming the gecko. Didn't even know it was going to happen. The thing just bolted and grabbed the mourning gecko. It was so natural that it's like that's what they do, man. Like even that short video is a 1:43 video that I watched. I'm like, that's what those things do. That's what they do. That is what they do.
That's definitely what they do. And they're smart about it too. They're opportunistic with that kind of thing. I'm sure if they found a nest full of baby squirrels, they would eat them. But they're that's what they do. They eat anoles. And I would say their hunting success with anoles in the wild is actually probably pretty low. An anole is a hard thing for them to target, but I'll tell you, they definitely try. And the juvenile ones definitely eat a lot of other anoles, 100%.
They seem to be a super intelligent species too, as far as anoles in general. I mean, you can look at certain animals and just not see much going on, and I'm not knocking anybody who keeps leopard geckos, but if I look at a leopard gecko, I you see something there, but it's just like very two-dimensional, like, hey, feed me. You look at an anole almost gives you that vibe on like, what are you thinking? Like what are you thinking that I'm thinking type of stuff. It's there's something there in the movements, their actions, everything they do is calculated. Everything that they do, it's even to the adaptations like we were talking about before. I mean, these things are just they are an absolutely incredible species or genus of reptile, man.
Yeah, that's why I hear people, again, I'm going to say it, I hear people comparing them to crested geckos, like, oh, it's the new crested gecko, it's beautiful, and I think to myself, I'm like, that is a freaking absurd, ridiculous that is a ridiculous, just insane.
As far as popularity, I can see it coming as far as in comparison is what the potential they have in the hobby. Crested geckos hold a big spot in the reptile community. Now, I can totally see with what's been happening even over the last 6-7 years with anoles, some of the work you're doing, some of the work Harmon's doing, they can absolutely fill that sector of the hobby, if you will. Morphs are coming, things are coming. The species, there's 5 times as many. There's 400 times as many species of anoles as there is crested geckos, right? Like it's, you can cater to an individual's preferences with anoles more than you really can with a crested gecko. I mean, I can see them as far as keeping wise, intellect wise, no comparison.
No comparison.
But as far as popularity, I wouldn't doubt him for 1 second becoming the next animal.
That would be cool. I mean,
I certainly hope so. Shit, man.
I kind of have like a staunch opinion on that. It's like, on one hand, I would love to see that. Obviously, like, I like seeing people enjoy keeping anoles. I love anoles. I love to spread the love. But at the same time, keeping an anole is not even compared to keeping a crested gecko. They're a lot smarter, and they have a lot. I think personally, they have a lot more needs. And some people say, oh, they're beginner animals, and they can be, they can be beginner animals. But if you want to really keep them and see them thrive and be amazing, it's not a beginner thing, I don't think.
No, it's the intellect. Smarter animals require more, regardless. They need more mental stimulation. They need more. I mean, keeping a crested gecko, and I keep them myself. I have them, but they're very dumb animals, right? They're very they're very simple. They're very simple-minded animals.
Two-dimensional is is a really good word for them. They don't look at you in that way. They don't look at you in that kind of way, like an anole does, or what's another one? Like a like an iguana does, or like you know,
Or
there's all
monitor.
kinds of monitor.
Monitors, monitors are another one. They're super, they're just not the same. And those animals do, in my opinion, like you're saying, they require more. That intelligence deserves more attention. You just you can't just, I don't want to say I don't keep anoles right now. I wouldn't suggest them to just anybody. They're definitely not just like an animal you're going to keep in a shoebox tote like you would a crested gecko or a leopard gecko or a cave gecko. I mean, you have to want to keep the anole. You have to be involved in keeping of an anole. Or
Yeah,
else you're
and
just going to wind up with just a not. I can't imagine they'd be in great shape. Just if you mentally abused an intelligent animal, it's like
they
keeping
just hate you.
horses in a stall. A horse will start swaying if you keep them in a stall. You can't. You gotta give these things enrichment.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I've seen it firsthand. Like if you keep an old the wrong way long enough, they're just gonna kind of hate you forever. And also, I side note on that. When you have something like a monitor or like a tegu or anything that does a lot of chemo reception with the tongue with the Jacobson's organ,
Mhm.
you're dealing with something that has it's a different sense of their senses are different, so they intake information differently. So you can do things differently with an anole for the most part. Now they do some chemoreception stuff, like as far as like using taste and pheromones, they do some of it, but it's pretty much almost with the anoles like learning and life is entirely visual. Unlike a
Mhm.
monitor, where like you could have a monitor with no eyes and it would probably do all right.
Mhm. Yeah.
With something with strong chemoreception like that, anole they learn through their eyes, they understand through their eyes. Everything is their eyes. Their communication is through their dewlaps and through through movement and through
Yes.
dewlap patterns and through like displays of visual cues. So when you're keeping a visual learning animal in an unstimulating environment, that really does scar them. And I do believe that they learn and they hold on to things. They hold on to things,
Mhm.
but yeah, and I don't know. And also, I wanted to mention another side note. You know, Cuban, we didn't talk about it, but it's something that people ask me about all the time. So I want to say it on here. The Cuban giant anoles and Jamaican species, and pretty much not just giant anoles, like almost any small anole, any anole from the Greater Antilles, which is the four Big Islands, they will live over 15 years. Even
It's
I
good to
know
know.
people. I've seen posts of people with the Cuban cliff anole. I saw one recently, 16 years old. I know there's a guy with a Jamaican
Yes.
twig anole in Europe, female, 14 years old. I talked to a guy who told me he had two male Anoles scarmani. They lived 18 years, both of them. I know people. I know that the record for a night anole, longevity-wise, was 24 years. Pretty impressive.
That's
I
awesome.
personally have animals that are close to 10 years old.
Really.
Yeah. So they live a long life. So it's a big. Even Cresties live a long time too, but you're committing to something that's going to live a while.
Yeah.
They're
Absolutely.
very intelligent,
Do they
animals.
slow down as they get older? Do they still produce for you? Do they still breed, or do they cut
Yeah,
off at a certain
yeah.
age?
I have a female who's at least at 2000. She's at least at 2016. She might be older than that, to be honest. And I
Mm.
have another female who I know for a fact is a 2014, and they produce like crazy still. I got that one female that, well, I can tell you a little story if you want. It's
Oh
somewhat of a,
yeah, stage is yours, brother.
yeah. So about it's coming up on, I think it's a little over a year ago now. I had just been getting some of those red throat Cuban false chameleons. Like I had a lone male, and I was getting a few more, and I was messaging Philippe Divastroli. I'm bad at pronouncing his name, and because
I can't remember either
he's
myself.
he's the only other guy working with some of the like the less common Cuban like false chameleon species, and so he told me he would have some eventually, and he would get me some of the red throats eventually. But then he told me that he had this one other species called Guamahaya, which is it's the Cuban false chameleon from the central mountains of Cuba, and it's I've seen them in the wild. They're freaking awesome. I personally, in my experience, I think they are the largest at all. I mean, they're huge, and they hatch huge. And I'm going ahead of myself. So Philippe told me he had them, and he's a guy that's known to really just want to see species thrive in the hobby and want to conserve a lot of awesome species for everyone to enjoy. Like he says like from few many.
He's an
So he told me
amazing dude.
he told me he's like, oh, I have these Guamahaya, I have a pair of them. I only got one offspring from them 4 or 5 years ago. They breed. I can't get them to lay fertile eggs. I don't know why they won't breed. The future is not looking good for them. So I was like, I've had a lot of good success with Anoles, and I've kind of built somewhat of a name for myself. So I asked him, I was like, would you consider sending them to me for me to give them a try outside here in Florida? And he was like, absolutely, So I took them on, and I had them for a few months, and they're a montane species, so they cool down in the winter, and I let them cool down, and it was amazing. They were in the 40s and still eating in the 50s, really cool down. And they cooled down and they cooled down. And then in May, I started getting eggs from them. And that's what I was going to say is they're really old. The female's like 9, 10 years old, maybe even older. Honestly, she's very old. And she was the last one in the whole country, the last female. We couldn't find, there was a few three or four males, but she was the last female that I could find. There's a lot of people that aren't on online stuff, but Philip couldn't find another one. I couldn't find another one. I have another friend who's pretty well connected who couldn't find another one. And so I ended up getting her to lay eggs, and I have a ton of offspring from them now.
That's a hell of an accomplishment, kid.
Yeah, it was a big accomplishment for me for sure, getting them back to going. Yeah,
congratulations.
She probably laid, I think she laid like 23 eggs. And her hash in the beginning, I was having like trouble hashing them, but after a while, they just all started hatching. So I think I have I've hatched 7.4, and I had actually funny thing is I was having a hard time hatching females, like of course, and I'm like, I have one female, and I keep hatching males. I hatched 6 males in a row and 5 males in a row, and then I finally hatched one female. I'm like, oh my gosh, yay! And then I hatched 2 more males, and I hatched another female, and then I just didn't hatch any more females. And I was like, dude, screw this! I only have 2 females. I have like 7 males. And then 3 weeks ago, I found a baby in their cage, and it was a female. And then yesterday, I found another baby in their cage, and it was a female. But yeah, no. So
you think it's something to do with temperature?
No, they totally do genetic determined sex determination. Genetic sex determination. It's like decided. It's like sex chromosomes. It's not like a turtle or a certain turtle. It's not like a turtle or a leopard gecko or something. Because I thought that too at first. I'm like, this makes no sense, and I consulted a few people about it, and they made a good point of why it's not. But yeah, that was my kind of little story about that was my recent big herpeto culture thing. And so yeah, now I went from having
contribution. That's amazing.
That old pair and being really not hopeful for them to I'm definitely going to produce a shitload of these things now. So I'm really happy about it because I mean they're amazing, and they lay huge eggs, they hatch huge, they get huge. They're docile. They're beautiful. If you look at my page on Instagram, I have lots of pictures of them. They're beautiful and awesome. And I can tell you 2 more stories that are of similar fashion. So in 2021, I got I got Anoles barracoa. That's the one I was saying was tame, the green one from Eastern Cuba, the night anole. I got a female from one of my friends. I was having a hard time sourcing a male. I sourced a male, and I bred a few of them, and then I lost the male. But I kind of found out later, not later, I knew at the time, they were very rare, and they were the last breeding group. Nobody has bred those since, 5, 6, 7 years ago. And I was able to get together a group of animals from across the country, just people that had like random lone male, random lone animal. And now I've produced hundreds of them. So that's the same thing with barracoa. I was able to get, like, they were pretty much on the brink of done for in herpetoculture. I was like, nah, let's get you guys going. I got them all together and bred them. It's kind of a similar thing like what Ron St. Pierre did with the Ludio glaris. There was a few animals left, and he managed to get them pumping, and now there's quite a few. It's the same thing with me for barracoa and the red dewlap false chameleon, which is kind of like they call it, it's Anoles porcus, which is it's an undescribed species, but it's similar to Anoles porcus, which is from Eastern Cuba. And that was another one that was really doing poorly in the hobby. I had him, Philippe had him. One other really amazing, awesome keeper, Eric Russell from ZooMed. Shout out to him, one of the best guys I know. And he had a few females. And another thing is, another similar to the Philippe story is he I had a lone male, and he had Philip has a group, and he had a group, and he's a busy guy. You know, he's always going around doing shows.
Mhm.
Oh, I think you lost me.
No,
Oh, you here?
You cut out now.
I'm back. I'm back.
All right,
I'm
all
back.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, someone called me, and he entrusted me on a breeding loan with those, and I had big time success with them. Produced dozens of them, so they're pumping now. And yeah,
That's
so
awesome.
part of the hobby for me is about getting to share this stuff with other people and recover these species, because
Absolutely.
I think until pretty recently, a lot of these anoles were kind of slacked on. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
What's up with CITES in these? Are they being imported at all? I mean,
so it's a. Uh,
are you literally
I
saving them? Like, did you
I'm
save the
literally,
hobby?
I'm literally saving them. I don't want to give myself too much credit, but no, I'm literally saving them because there,
Sure.
there's 425 species, 400, however many. I think it's either 425 or over 450. I don't remember the number, but it's a lot of species in that genus. And the whole genus, the only species listed on CITES are the false chameleons and the green Cuban giant anoles.
Oh, wow.
And that, by the way, side note, that listing happened because of, this is not confirmed, but this is my guess, is that because Anolis equestris potior came into the hobby suddenly, Cuba saw that and they were like, we don't like that.
Hmm.
And then they CITES listed almost all of the giant anoles, except for smallwood eye and noblei. They're noble eye. They're all CITES listed. And they're on CITES 3, which, it doesn't sound that hard. Like, oh, I'll just do a CITES 3 import. But then the thing with that is, so I don't know if you're familiar with how U.S. Fish and Wildlife will kind of just deny stuff. They have a habit of, so there's a few places where if you try to get animals, even if you have CITES docs and you have all the paperwork that's necessary to bring the animals in, U.S. Fish and Wildlife will basically be like, but fuck you.
Damn.
Florida sounds like it'd be one of them.
Man.
Yeah, no. I'm saying, so like I'm from what I understand, animals that come in with CITES from Australia, certain animals, especially like blue tongues, shinglebacks. Now, shinglebacks was recently they started denying them. Egernia, those kind of species from Australia, U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Even if you have CITES from Europe, they'll tell you, nah. Anything from Brazil and Cuba. So any CITES listed Cuban wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife will be like,
Huh.
So yeah, they
Interesting.
were really in big trouble, and and could I probably figure out how to do CITES on them? Yeah, I know someone who's done CITES on them since the listing in 2019. I think it was either 2019 or 2021. The listing, I think it was 2019. They listed them, but I know only one person. I think only one CITES anole shipment of Cuban species has come in since they were listed, and it was from Ashley Dezan, Northern Lights. She imported 2 pairs of Anoles porcus. Phil Tremper had one of them. My friend Eric had the other one. Now I have both of them. But and yeah, so pretty much Cuban species on CITES is not going to happen. So saved them. Yeah.
Well, that's good then, man. That's a huge accomplishment, John. Like honestly, like I hope you give yourself credit for that. People seriously underestimate, the power and authority of Fish and Wildlife, right? Like they can literally, I mean, with CITES and everything, they can just end a species like that in the hobby. Like you will never ever see it again if they want that. And unless it's here and people like yourself working with it and keeping them going in the hobby, they're gone. You'll never see them again unless you hop on a plane and go see them in the wild. Like you're not going to see them again. Like there's a
Yeah.
huge responsibility that comes with keeping some of these species too. It's not just like keep cool animals in a box or let's just make babies. I mean, there is some serious responsibility that comes with keeping some of these rare species of animals, man. Like I'm glad
Yeah.
that people like yourself are doing it because I'll feel more comfortable. My kids may be able to have these someday. I mean that's it's cool, dude.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. And like you said, even the species that may have once been commonly available in the
Mhm.
past, it goes on CITES one day. That's
Yep.
just the end. Like a Chinese
Yep.
big-headed turtle, like a Chinese the crocodile lizards, the Shinisaurus. Just
Shinosaurus,
in
yeah.
Shinisaurus in the 80s, you could get them. They were there. They
Hmm.
were cheap.
There were
And
nothing.
now it's like good luck. Not good luck, but you're
Yep.
gonna spend a big buck. And the U.S. Fish and
You want
Wildlife
it?
they can just be okay with something for a little bit. Like Abronia is a great example. Abronia came into the country illegally from Mexico for
Yep.
many, many, many years. They were coming in illegally, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife was kind of just like, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day, someone at U.S. Fish and Wildlife was like, wait a second, why are we not doing something about this? And then they cracked down to shit. They busted all the people taking them out of Mexico. Anyone, they traced all the sales, anyone that had bought those, purchased those animals that were coming in illegally from Mexico, even though for so many years they didn't give a shit. They just were like, okay, this is changing today. If you bought these animals that came in from Mexico, we're taking them. And they confiscated tons of Abronia. In my opinion, totally unjustly confiscated a ton of Abronia. And, people were trying to do Abronia legally. There were people doing Abronia legally, but U.S. Fish and Wildlife just didn't care. And they didn't care about the illegal import. So it was hard for the legit people to stay in business. And that was just kind of the crumbling of it. And now, there's still some left, but a lot of those species you'll never see again. Like Abronia frosti, I don't know if anyone has that one, but I know that used to come in, and I have not heard of anyone with that since. Yeah.
No,
Sorry to go off
you're all
topic.
good, man. No,
That's awesome, man. I love hearing about this stuff. There's people that know more than I do, man. I actually wanted to do a whole episode on CITES and fish and wildlife. I would love for someone that knows everything about the process to come on and talk to us. We have guests here and there that all know little bits and pieces, but I'd love for someone to spill the beans about the whole process. You know what I'm saying? Like, how does an animal make it onto the list? How does it get regulated? What's the paperwork involved? I'm just super curious myself. I've never imported anything. I've never been through the process.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite familiar with it, but not familiar enough to talk a lot about it because I don't want to get things wrong. All I know is it's a treaty that was enacted in 1974. Most of the world's nations are a part of it, and the countries of origins for the species, they propose a species to be listed at a certain listing of CITES. CITES 1 is like critical things. CITES 2 is, they're all critical, but CITES 1 is like no export, no quotas. CITES 2 is some export quotas, need a lot of papers. CITES 3 is doable, basically. And they're proposed by the country of origin. Generally, if they're proposed, they are added to the list. And it's, it's for one reason or another, they add them. I don't know. I don't necessarily know what the protocol is for determining reasons, but yeah, you should definitely get someone on here to talk about that because CITES and international export and understanding U.S. Fish and Wildlife and understanding CITES is
it's a very
I think it'd
be an interesting topic. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
My opinion on CITES is that it worked. It barely worked in 1974, and it doesn't work now. And it basically just prevents people that really care and are doing a lot of work in the private sector of the captive hobby. It pretty much limits your bloodlines, makes it harder to do things, and doesn't really do much good for wild animals anymore. They could reform it to make it good, but that's bureaucracy for you. So
facts.
We work with what we can. Yeah, definitely a good topic.
Right. So let's get back to these anoles. So let's talk about some courtship, right? So do you see different stuff about between them, like courtship? What all happens with that?
Yeah, definitely. Certain species are, well, we'll start in the Cuban giant anoles. So the green species, the night anoles, are totally cool to be kept in pairs for their entire life. Sometimes trios work, sometimes they don't. But I have trios, I have pairs that have lived together for 5-6 years, no problem. You will see a lot of courtship, so they cool down in the winter. In the winter, they really do slow down, especially the species that are in more cool areas of the islands. They'll slow down in the winter. And then come March, come April, May, you'll start to see the males starting to get really territorial and throwing up their dewlap a lot. And they have different dewlap displays for different actions. So I can tell like if a male is courting or just like showing off or seeing another male, they do one head motion. If the male's like, I'm gonna breed, they do it's a shorter head motion and then they will breed. And they'll court each other. Usually the males, honestly, in my experience with the green giant Cuban anoles, the Cuban crown giants, the males are very nice to the females almost all the time because luckily those species the males and females are about the same size. So yeah, courtship with them is just a lot of dewlapping, a lot of puffing up and walking around and strutting your stuff, and generally is very peaceful and nice. Jamaican giants have a huge amount of, well, not, I guess, what's the wording? They have very strong sexual dimorphism, the Jamaican giants, which you don't see in the Cuban species. So I think that, so you have the male Jamaican giants, they are giants. They really get, 16, 18 inches long, big, spiky, big,
Damn.
big, spiky, green, awesome
Mm.
lizard. They get big, but the females only get about as big as a big adult male brown anole. Yeah, so they have
Big
huge,
difference, so that's
big difference, huge. I think actually one of the biggest size dimorphism. I think there's one other one that I know has big size dimorphism is Anoles farius, but Garmani I think has the biggest size difference between those sexes of any anole, and maybe like one of the most of any like reptile. They have huge size dimorphism. No, not any reptile because the big snakes, but definitely of any lizard. And the males can definitely be rough, of Garmani. The males can, it's all on an individual basis. You get males that are nice and males that are mean. I've seen males beat the shit out of their females. I'm not gonna look, I'm not gonna lie to you. I've seen Garmani get rough with the girls. The males are big and they're gnarly and they're forceful and they'll kind of beat the shit out of the females and they breed with them. They grab them and hold them and restrain them, and they can be a little gnarly. So that's just something and not every time. I know people that have pairs that live together forever nicely, but Garmani can definitely be mean with courtship. But I don't see that in the Jamaican twig anoles. Obviously, the size difference is not even close in those. The Jamaican twig anoles are nice. They live well in pairs, although I have seen problems with females. It's so weird with keeping trios of the small anoles. I tend to see a lot of inter-female conflict, but with the giant anoles, really, I don't see really not much inter-female conflict as long as the females are well matched. So that's them. And then Camaleolis, Porcus, and red throats, you can't even keep them together, really, in my experience. I mean, I know people that do. There's always outliers. My animals get natural everything, and they're mean in the breeding season. Those males will beat the crap out of the females, and they'll breed them and breed them and breed them and breed them until they get exhausted and kind of like die. So I keep I call it my sorority because I keep like 3 or 4 female porcus together in one cage. They're fine.
I was just gonna ask you. Okay, so you do. Yeah. And then you'll introduce one male in there for X amount of time, and then pull him out.
No, I just take the females out and put them with the males because I have multiple males. So I'm like, okay, you bred with that male, you bred with this male, you bred with that male. So I know that I'm getting, at least some bloodline diversity from the babies.
Yeah.
But the Guamahaya is fine. My Guamahaya pair lives together just fine, but they're freaking huge. They're huge. The male porcus has a bit of size in the female, but the Guamahaya female is bigger than the male. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't even recommend keeping Barbatus together personally, and if your animals are fit, especially like, so this is, I was talking to my friend about this, and with I've seen the night anoles hanging out together in the wild in pairs. They really do. They're quite social. Then a male will have a hierarchy, or not a harem of females. And I've literally seen them basking together, hanging out together in the wild. The night anoles, they're quite social. Camaleolis and also night anoles move a lot and have a pretty big home range for a lizard that's arboreal. The Camaleolis literally actually will sit in one place for 5 days and not move. So when you have an animal that kind of is not really moving so much, is a lot more dormant, a lot more slow moving, when that animal sees a female, that's the time. That's the time.
Yeah.
So that's my outlook on why the Camaleolis can be such aggressive breeders, is because they're not having.
They gotta take advantage of it.
Yeah, they gotta take advantage of it when they see the girls, because they're not active, they're not moving as much. They're not seeing the girls every day. So
great observations, man. Awesome observations.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I spent a lot of time outside. So Oh yeah,
That's
Jamaican
that's
twig and
great.
all.
I think that's a huge part of keeping animals successfully in captivity is studying them in nature, man. You have to see them, their natural behaviors. The whole they're in captivity thing just doesn't work for me. I mean, we are replicating their natural environment, right? Like if you want a healthy, thriving animal, you keep them as close to nature as possible. I say it all the time. John Smith down the street is not our proxy. Nature is our proxy, right? So yes, they're in captivity, and yes, you have to do things different, but everything you do should be compared to nature, not the next man. Like
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
just
Yeah, it's learn from nature and learn from observing your own animals.
yes. When
So
you're pairing these, John, are you looking for any particular characteristics or traits or anything when you're pairing up certain animals, or are you just looking with the Knowles for the healthiest specimen you have?
well, so you can't, in my experience, and I've produced a lot of giant anoles,
Mhm.
you can't really line breed a species that's extremely highly variable. I mean, like,
Okay.
not, that was kind of like a misnomer, extremely highly, but giant anoles are highly, highly, highly variable. Like you can have a spotted male and a spotted female of Barracoa and produce patternless offspring. So I don't
Interesting.
breed. I don't breed for any kind of traits with them.
Okay.
I have pairs that live together and produce beautiful offspring, and they consistently produce every year.
Nice.
And that's just I leave those pairs together. I don't switch up anybody because when you switch them up, that's when you start to have conflict.
Yeah.
When they're
Mhm.
familiar with each other, you don't have conflict. Like if you have a
Mhm.
pair and you add a second female, a long term pair, the females will fight. uh, so no, I don't. But I do have certain animals that throw certain characteristics. Like I have one big
Okay.
green small wood eye, and he has bright green babies, and I have another small wood eye who's more of like a kind of like bluish green, and he throws more bluish babies. So like to an extent, but
Nice.
I don't breed for it. I just have different blood.
Okay.
Okay. Interesting.
So what's the gestation period for the females, and then what's your incubation method for them?
Okay. Well, I can answer that whole question if you want me to.
Go ahead. That's what
Please.
that's what you're here for.
So in the breeding season, which is spring through the summer. Actually, my breeding season literally just ended. I collected the last eggs like 2 weeks ago, and I haven't gotten any more. So it's looking like as soon as the temperatures start to drop like into the low 70s, they're like done. Uh, so they in the hot times and in the breeding season, they'll lay one egg a week, and they'll lay one egg a week from March until November. So
Yeah.
and they do, and it's not like they breed and then they lay an egg. Like they can breed one time and lay eggs for many many weeks. They
So
do
they retain sperm.
sperm retention. Yeah, they do that.
Okay. Yeah.
Especially Cameliolis does that on the subject of them not having so many opportunities to breed in the wild. They do that especially strong.
Makes
The
sense.
Nightingales don't do it as strongly. In my observations, I could be wrong. But so they lay one egg a week. That so I copied Ron St. Pierre a little bit with his housing system. So he used sink bases. Let me go get a charger really quick. My phone's about to die. Hold
Okay.
on, 2 seconds.
Man.
It's a good guess. This kid is smart, man. He's
Oh,
smart.
for sure. I didn't think
Mm.
they would produce like that, like the smaller anoles. I thought they would take a little bit more longer time, but that's
Something's
cool
got
as
to keep
hell.
them
I like
similar.
that.
They got to be classified as anoles for some reason. I
Yeah. Well,
imagine
I
its
just think,
behaviors.
yeah, I just thought it was like, the smaller anoles, they need to produce more just because they're so small. And I mean, those giants they're giants. They eat those smaller anoles, so I figured the small
Mm.
ones have to produce more. But that's cool that no matter what kind of anole it is, you're getting an egg a week.
Yeah, they're still mad productive. Okay, so I'll get back to it. So I copied Ron St. Pierre a little bit. My basis. So what I do is I take outdoor storage bins made by Suncast. They're the 22-gallon outdoor storage bin, and I tape that onto a large size Reptibreeze cage. And then I take a potted plant, I use mass canes, Trichina fragrans. That's the main
I
plant
don't
that I
know what
use for
that
the
is.
adults. A mass cane, if you want to display it so everyone can see. I use a mass cane plant. It's a
Hmm.
Dracaena, native to Africa, and a really cool plant, very hardy, very drought resilient plant. Obviously, they don't get droughts, and it's in a 3-gallon pot. I put the 3-gallon pot in the base, and I put a bunch of branches in the tank. And all they do is they just go down. They'll lay their eggs in the 3-gallon pot, and that way it's super easy for me to recover the eggs out of the pot because it's just a little 3-gallon pot. So I can go
No.
in, dig up the eggs. They tend to nest in the same spot for one. Yeah, if you go and look at some of my pictures, you can see the leaves in the back, like that picture I just posted of the Luteogalaris. Galeris. Or actually, if you scroll down on my page a little bit, scroll down, I can show
I'm
you.
always looking for new plants. I love plants. They're like my second passion.
It's me too. Just keep scrolling. You go further. It's for way further down. I have a picture of a full set, couple full setups. If you
I
scroll
was on there
way,
earlier, dude, and I was like, let me stop liking pictures before this kid hates me. I could have went through and liked every freaking one on there.
Oh shit!
keep
No,
going.
seriously, because I get carried away. I'm like, boom, 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 boom. Like, oh my god! Next thing you know, you got 500 likes. You're like, who the fuck is this guy?
All right, hold on. I haven't seen it yet. Oh, whoops.
Oh, what is that, dude?
Keep scrolling. Go up a little. I think go up a little bit. Go up.
So you keeping your offspring together, or were those females? Are you keeping babies together?
Yeah, babies live together. But I'll talk to you about that too. Sorry, I must have missed it. There's a picture here where I have all my full setups. I keep going
What's
up.
that yellow guy?
It's an albino.
Oh, it is.
Oh, there you go. Okay, right there. Stop. Go down. Scroll down one. Scroll down one. No. Scroll down one. Scroll down one. Now to the left, like right there on the left, you see the picture with all the plants. There's the pink dewlap, and then one above the pink. Yeah, there you go. So that's if you click on that. So that's a mass cane. They're like I use them for the adults because they provide. Like I said, the crown giants, they walk on leaf surfaces, so they provide leaf surfaces for them to walk on, but they also provide cover, and they also have very thick stems, and the Anoles will use the stems too as a perch. And I just place one plant in a 3-gallon tank. The plant will grow into the tank, like in that picture you see. It looks really beautiful. They grow really long leaves. They grow around the foliage, and they lay in the soil of the pot. It's super easy to recover it. I recover the eggs. I use Hatchite. I know it's kind of like bougie, and I could just use perlite, but I've just found that Hatchite is the best substrate for them. And
Jay uses it too.
No, it's good. Yeah.
It's good shit. It's good shit. It's good shit. And I found really, and this is a big point that I want to make for anyone watching that is interested in eventually breeding anoles, they incubate dry.
Or I did not know that either.
It doesn't have to be like, not bone dry. You have to, but there shouldn't be any water accumulated in the bottom of the Hatchite. Like they need, if you get Hatchite and you get it out of the bag, you don't even want to damp. Like if it's a new bag and you open it, you don't even dampen Hatchite. You just put the egg straight into it. And
I do.
And then you can leave it for like the whole season, and you don't have to re-wet it until the very end. Like they incubate very dry. And if you incubate them too wet, you'll notice they'll incubate, they'll go all the way to full size. The eggs will swell up, get really big, and then the babies just are fully developed in the egg and dead. I learned that the hard way. And that's for anything. Cuban false chameleons, pretty much any anole, to be honest. Well, the smaller anoles you can get away with a little bit more. But giant anoles.
It almost looks like a freaking like a tree monitor. It almost has a blue tree monitor pattern, man. I think it's cool.
There's way better pictures of him on there if you look. That's my favorite. It's Anoles.
Beautiful animals, man. Yes.
He's a fucking stud, dude. Yeah. And then the incubation time you asked. So they should a healthy incubation time for them is between 55 and 60 days. And some anoles, the smaller species will incubate 45 to 55. Giant anoles, I've noticed, and I incubate at exactly. My room fluctuates between 70 in the hot time. I incubate them in a storage unit. Like my house has a storage unit, and I incubate them in a storage unit. The temperature ranges from like 77 to 81, and they incubate in 60 days flat. 60 days pretty much flat. Should be 60 days.
Nice.
For just about every species, then, anoles in general.
Every species that I keep. The smaller ones may go a little faster, but should be 60 days. And obviously, like anything else, the more cool you keep them, the longer they're going to incubate. But I've tried it, and I noticed, it doesn't really make a difference on the size they hatch or the sex ratios or anything.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Keep scrolling, Jay. Tell us about some of these things, man. I again, like I said, from a kid keeping green anoles to what I see in the hobby today, like I'm
click on that. Go down.
Like wow.
Click on the Cuban false chameleon. No, go to the right there. Go down. Click on the one in the middle.
The one with the red.
The one with the yellow dewlap. Yeah, that's Guamo. That's Guamahaya. That's Guamahaya. They're really cool. They don't. It's hard, if you're not well versed in anoles, it's hard to look at that and be like, is that not just a Cuban false chameleon? But in person, they're very different. And now, if you go to the left, go to that one post to the left, with a red dewlap. The
Yeah,
red
that's what I was
dewlap.
gonna ask. What's the one with the red dewlap? That
Yeah,
bad boy.
yeah, that's Anoles
He's
aporcus.
cool.
Yeah, Anoles
That's
aporcus.
cool.
It's a local endemic in some places in eastern Cuba. The holotype was found. Well, there was recently a study that kind of like described. It didn't describe them, but it was like this study discovered them as a species. They described them in this one mountain in eastern Cuba called Gran Piedra, a place I've been, really cool place. And they found them there, and they're in a few localities in eastern Cuba, mostly in the mountains. I know they're at some places that are not so montane, but and
Hmm.
they're really cool. And the Cuban false chameleons, they'll take it cold, man. I mean, that thing will take it in the 40s, and the Guamahaya will take it in the 40s, no problem.
I heard they were pretty bulletproof animals.
That's a strong statement.
Yeah.
They they are very good with temperature, and if you keep them the right way, they're bulletproof. But they are very much more prone to dehydration than the green ones
Really?
are.
Okay.
Yes.
So are you
100%
misting
about
these things? Do you have misting setups? Are you spraying them? What do you
Yeah,
do?
I hand spray everything.
Okay.
okay.
Yeah, because hand spraying, as much as it like might be inconvenient, then
I do it myself.
you put the right amount of water
Yeah.
in every cage. My cages can't flood, but you're putting the right amount of water in every cage. My animals will come and drink right out of the spray nozzle, so you're making sure they get the right amount. That everyone drinks, and it's an
Mhm.
excuse to look at every single cage every day, even though I do it anyway.
Absolutely. I
Even
tell
though I
people all the time,
do that
you
anyways,
know,
but
it's definitely not money. I promise you, it is not money that I don't have Miss King set up on all these 200 enclosures. I promise you.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. I want to
enjoy
see what's going
spraying,
on.
hand spraying. Every enclosure is a little different. I'm checking the animals while I'm doing it. I mean, there's just so much that goes into hand spraying. It's hardly
Yeah.
a task, a challenge, or a burden or an inconvenience for me. It's
no,
it's
I love it. I have
absolutely.
I will just say this because it's a joke. I have a Miss King and it's not even set up.
There you go. So I
So
don't know if you know. Have you ever seen the David Attenborough show, Life in Color? They did a miniseries.
Yeah,
So
I
you
have.
saw how they were showing the dewlaps on the Anoles?
Yeah,
I think that's so amazing. When you look at these
yeah.
things, it's like, that's what we see, but what are they seeing?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's totally worth mentioning that what
Yeah,
when you see in an old dewlap, what you see is not what they see. I mean,
not
they
at
see
all.
because they can see further into they can see into like they can see different wavelengths of light than what we can
I
see.
wish
They
everybody would watch that documentary. I ask just about every one of our guests because nobody understands. Like even animals are like, oh well, I don't use UVB or this or that. I'm like, but UV has so much more importance with certain species of reptiles than just you know, for vitamin supplementation and whatnot. Like certain species. I mean, these UV lights are part of their life. Like this is what they need to communicate, to thrive, to see. There's just so much more
1,000 million
than we
percent.
get.
And people always will message me and they'll be like, "Oh, like why are your animals so colorful? Like my animal is blue, my animal is dull. Like why are your animals so colorful?" And the truth is, it's because I I really with my animals that are in the patio, I find lighting to be very important. And my animals outside, they live outside, and I think when they can see their natural color range, like I think when you keep an animal in too low light or like skewed light, they even won't they like their body won't be the right color because their brain sees a certain light, they see a
I
certain light,
agree.
and they're like, okay, like this is the color I should be. But my animals all
I
look like they're
agree.
from the wild. Like a giant and all other than Equestrius potior and like Luteogularis should really be bright green. Like any smallwood eye should be bright green. Like if you're seeing blue, you see a lot of blue smallwood eye in Europe, and they're healthy and everything. It's no husbandry issue or anything, but those animals should all be green. They should all be
yeah.
green. Seeing blue crown giants, it's something with the lighting, makes them turn blue. Don't know what, but
Hmm. So
It
what about
definitely
for
works.
your
Whatever
winter
you're doing,
time?
brothers.
yeah.
Yeah.
When you have an
So
animal
for your
that like
winter
totally
time.
lives its life off of visual cues, light is
Hmm.
like so important for them. So important.
Yes.
So for the winter time, right? Because like I said, you keep them outside. Uh, like, is there any time that you're like, you know what, I might have to bring these inside, or you just keep them out all the time, 24
Well,
7?
it depends who it is. So anyone that I feel like is vulnerable, anyone who's old, anyone
Okay.
who's
Yeah.
young, they'll come inside. I've never really had. I had one hatchling that it got kind of like in the 50s one day, and this hatchling like got a neuro issue and didn't make it. That was the one time I ever had something die from the cold. Other than that, cold is pretty, it's pretty all right for them. It's also on a per species basis. You gotta decide who comes in, like that in that picture, that one with the two on the branch, Anoles luteogularis. They come from the far western parts of Cuba, and they can even like all the way out in the. It's a long name, but there's a peninsula in the very west part of Cuba, and it can get freaking cold there, like as cold as it gets in South Florida, easy. So they stay outside all year. The Cameliolis stays outside all year. But like my old man Baracoa, and any of my old ones or anyone that I feel like needs to come in comes in when it gets like into the 50s, pretty much.
I love the different species of wood that you keep in there, man. I think the bark texture and everything is super important too. Like everybody keeps everything on cork. There's probably like half the animals we keep in captivity that do not come from places where there's cork trees. Like, I think it's super cool.
And also, this is another thing I wanted to mention about using the bark. So when you use smooth bark and rough bark and semi-rigid bark in an enclosure, you're encouraging the animals, especially animals like an anole or a gecko where they have toe pads and nails. You're encouraging them to not just use one or the other, not just use cork bark. They're not using their toe pads; they're using their nails. When you have multiple kinds of wood, you're pretty much making it that they have reasons to strengthen their nails, but also to strengthen their toe pads. Does that make sense?
100% agree. Absolutely.
Like when you use a palm, like I use some palm trunks, like thin, like young royal palm trunks or anything that's very smooth. They use their toe pads to walk on that, or they use their toe pads to walk on the leaf surfaces. But on the oak bark, they use their nails, and then that really strengthens their nails. And a big sign of health in giant anoles is like how strong are your nails. That's something I experienced.
It is in humans, sure. Humans, even horses, their hooves, everything. I mean, a keratin and is
it's big. Yeah, so if an anole can't climb, there's something wrong.
Oh yeah.
What's that thingy in there? A lizard? I can't really see on my phone.
A lizard, brown anole.
Yep.
So those are ones you're catching. Are you setting up little traps for them? How are you catching them? Are you just out there having a blast catching them by hand?
Yeah, I've done it my whole life, so I'm pretty nasty.
Hell yeah!
I use a noose, and
there you go.
I hand catch them, and I'll go out at night and collect them because I also keep scarlet king snakes, and I have like small Bahamian boas, small Puerto Rican boas that are eating anoles. So it works out for me.
My grandparents raised me. My grandparents had a house down in Clearwater, so my whole life we'd go down there for like 3 months out of the year when I was a kid, and that's all I ever did was go down to Florida and catch frickin' anoles and baby alligators, believe it or not, and king snakes or corn snakes under all the water pump things. I'd pull them. I'd catch anything that would crawl. I'd go down there and catch, man. And hands down, without a doubt, catching anoles I'll never forget it.
Yeah. No, it's a time. I love catching anoles. That's why, bro, when I go to Cuba, man, or Jamaica, I'm just like, ooh.
Yeah.
How often
did you go to school? Did you go to? I mean, you sound like an educated kid. Did you go to college?
Yeah. I graduated from University of Miami last year.
What'd you study?
I was a double major in marine science and bio, so essentially like
awesome.
bio. Yeah, awesome. I've been involved with some herp research. I've done field work with a few grad students, and I'm published on a paper and a few other things. So I'm relatively familiar with the science side of everything. I try
not for nothing, but as a kid, my idols were Indiana Jones and Jacques Cousteau.
Yeah, makes sense.
Nice.
That's freaking cool, dude. So I was gonna say, I mean, that's something amazing. You just travel. I mean, for school, going and catching animals. I mean, that'd be a dream come true, dude. Like
that stuff wasn't for school though. The Cuba and Jamaica, that's like my personal travel.
Did you go out there for vacation, or were you out there for the animals?
No. Well, Cuba, I go with it. So you can Cuba. There's some travel restrictions in Cuba, so you can't travel there for tourism. I go with a non-for-profit. That bring binoculars to like less fortunate areas to promote ecotourism. Like they bring binoculars to like promote bird watching tours. So
really,
it's called Optics for the Tropics. Awesome group. That's who I go to Cuba. That's who I go to Cuba with. Jamaica, obviously, you can just go. I did spend 3 months in the Galapagos for school, but I don't talk about that much because there's not a lot of anoles there. But I've seen like a shit ton of marine iguanas and land iguanas and lava lizards and Galapagos tortoises and stuff.
Finches.
But yeah, a lot of finches and penguins and blue-footed boobies and seals and lots of sea turtles. Even saw some of those Galapagos racers. That was cool.
Have you
But
read
yeah,
any of Darwin's books? Have you actually
uh,
read any of his literature?
I had not like full books, but like there's a few. So I have the oh gosh, oh my gosh, I'm blanking.
Theory of
What is
Evolution.
the
The
theory of
Theory of
evolution?
Evolution.
Yeah, I have a paper copy of it, and there's a few excerpts in that are really interesting and kind of metal. Like, damn, you guys were like stowing these tortoises away in the Beagle and eating them. That's fucked
Man,
up.
MS Beagle, boy. People don't. I've read a few of his books, man. I've dabbled in his writings.
Yeah,
But yeah, man. Yeah, they sure did.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
read honestly. I don't. I'm bad at reading books. I've read a few. I've read books in my life, like many, but I read a lot of scientific literature. That's mostly what I do.
Awesome.
If you want to improve your keeping, scientific literature is the place to go.
Absolutely.
Obviously, there's tons of good care books, but if you read studies about things in the wild, it can definitely help a lot. It definitely has helped me a lot.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
I
Going
use
there, man.
actually
You
use
got
the
you got
EDU
boots on the
all the time.
ground, man. That's cool. Crap. That's awesome, dude. I envy you, man. That's
I appreciate it. That's very nice. I
very
appreciate it.
cool.
Thank you.
So is there any like any kind of health concerns about these anoles that people should know about before they actually even start trying to get into them?
Yeah, there's a few things that I've dealt with. So fatty liver is definitely a thing for them.
Really?
And yeah, 100%. That can come from really high,
Rodents?
real. Well, yeah, obviously that's like, but not just that. So any any if you feed something to any of those, there's like certain formulated reptile diets that are very high in nutrients. Overfeeding those, like grub pie or like something like that, that can cause
Okay.
fatty liver. A lot of superworms, a lot of wax worms can cause fatty liver. Mostly though with adults. Like if you're feeding a baby anole, you could feed that thing as much as you want. It's just going to grow long, not fat. But yeah, fatty liver definitely a thing for them. This is a really big one. So I don't know if you guys keep. Well, I know you guys keep new cow geckos. So you guys know about zigzag tails?
Mm-hmm.
Never
Zigzag
experienced it,
tails.
but I've heard of it. Yeah.
So pretty much, if an anole is or a lizard is, well, this is what I think. When they're lacking in calcium, they'll start to kind of use less calcium in the bones in their tail to kind of repurpose it for the actually important parts of their body, and their tails will get all like crooked and zigzag, and that totally happens in anoles, and I've had it happen multiple times, even in animals where they were kept the same as their cage mates, everything was fine, and just one random animal did it. But in my experience with new cow geckos, that's not reversible. In anoles, interestingly enough, even though it looks
Right.
like it's a bone malformation, it's totally reversible if you give them enough calcium and enough nutrients. That zigzag tail thing will go away. But if you continue to do it, it'll just get to the point where it won't go away. What else have I dealt with in anoles? Um, you know, they can if they have weak bones, they're prone to breaks. I've gotten animals that have just came out of rough situations and they have really brittle bones, but that's just like anything else. I'm just thinking if there's anything else.
The eye thing you were talking about with the eyes and the lighting.
Oh yeah. Well, obviously, too little lighting. It's not like a sickness, but you might not get the colors you desire.
No, the too high light. Remember you were saying where it scarred their retinas or something like that?
Yeah. Photokeratoconjunctivitis.
There you
That's
go.
totally a thing for them and for any diurnal lizard. Geez, I have to think if there's anything else. Photokeratoconjunctivitis. But again, another reversible condition. So I've seen in Cameliolis where they lack. I never figured out what nutrient it was because it wasn't in my care. But some of the animals that I have, they were lacking in some nutrient and they were having problems with their eyes, where they're like the edges of their eyes inside of their like outer eye was getting all messed up and they weren't shedding it right, and it looks like an eye infection, but it's the result of some nutrient deficiency. And I have one
Oh,
female.
interesting.
I have a male Guamahaya and a female red throat who are blind in one eye from that. Not from me though. They came into my care like that. And face rubbing. That's another thing. I mean, it's not really a sickness, but you just got to know your animals and watch them. And if you notice that they don't look happy, change something. So they are prone to
Are you
face
doing
rubbing.
anything extra with supplementation? Is just thinking now, if they lay so many eggs and the zigzag tail and whatnot, do you find any connection between the females laying eggs and calcium depletion, or do you
No, their eggs are not.
super
Camelliolus, yeah.
calcium?
Camelliolus eggs are much more calcified than
Okay.
the green giants or than a Jamaican giant is. So Camelliolus needs a shit ton of calcium, and
Okay.
in that's and I do in the summer when the girls are laying eggs, I feed them snails because snails have not only they have a lot of calcium, but I think there's other things in snails that we really lack in conventional feeders, like collagen, for example. I think is a big thing for not just for Camelliolus, but for anything that's eating snails in the wild. So that's something I supplement in the Camelliolus diet in the summer when they're laying eggs. But they do perfectly fine off of insects, other than like commercial insects. Other than that, I used to use Repashy Calcium Plus, but recently I've been not liking D3 supplements, and I switched over to Arcadia Earth Pro A, and so I use that, and I just use the regular RepCal without vitamin D3. You can use it on every feeding. I don't because I gut load my bugs. I gut load them with the Missouri Better Bug, but I mix Missouri Better Bug with a little bit of Zoomed Crested Gecko diet and bee pollen and the cricket diet. That way, instead of just gut loading the insects, it maintains the insects, but they're still eating something that's really good for them. And I use carrots and dandelion greens and stuff. I think gut loading is huge, and I already mentioned him, but I have a really good and extremely smart, very awesome keeper friend from Cuba who basically said to me, he's like, gut loading, that's the thing. That's the thing to do. Gut loading is the big one. I think if you gut load your insects the right way, you don't even really need to dust them. But I do.
Yeah.
I'll do the same thing, dude. I raise my own feeders for that reason. I just don't trust what other people do. So I've just made it a point to raise my own feeders, and I literally control everything that goes in them, ultimately controlling what goes into my animals, man. I get it's a hassle, right? I don't suggest nor do I expect everyone to go through the crap I go through raising all these damn bugs, but it helps me sleep at night,
No, I love raising insects. I know it sounds weird, but I've been breeding roaches for like so many generations, and
Oh, dude, I breed like six, 7 different species of roaches, man. Like
I love roaches. Recently, I've been adding isopods to my animals' diet because they're a super good source of calcium.
no.
Because their exoskeletons are literally calcium carbonate. How could you get any better? I use dairy cows, big dairy cows, and most of my animals really like them. Some of them don't, but I try to vary their diet as much as possible. And for the Jamaican twig anole, we didn't really talk about them a lot, but they're probably out of all the animals I keep, they're probably the one that is the most prone to like calcium crash, egg binding, and just health issues overall. Because it just seems like twig anoles in general, Jamaican twig anole especially, like Garmani, the Jamaican giant, is a freaking brute. Those things are invincible. But the twig anoles are sensitive. You make one misstep with them, and they're not going to do well. So I supplement them. I supplement them a lot. I gut load their feeders, and I give them varied diet, like a lot of variability in their diet. I give them high DI fruit flies. They're one of the anoles that really like small prey. Even the adults will hunt little tiny things. So I give them high DI fruit flies. I give them crickets. I give them superworms. I breed those buffalo worms. Those are a really good small anole feeder. Buffalo worms and buffalo beetles. I give them like mini superworms. I give them other anoles. I give them gecko diet. I'm going to start giving it. I have a friend who gives them mango, and they seem to like it, like mango sap. So I'm going to give them that because those are ones that you really got to pay attention to a lot with the supplementing because they crash and burn really easy.
How would you get mango sap? Just, I guess, like cut the outside of a.
Not even sap, but just like slightly squeezed mango. You know what I'm saying? Like you just take a mango and kind of like pulp it up.
Yeah.
Not even like liquid.
You get some fresh mango down there.
You just take a mango and kind of just like
slice it,
like
and
rip it up a little bit, make it like all pulpy, and just put it in the cage.
Okay.
Yeah, you can get fresh mango here. No, 100%.
Yeah.
And I also Ron St. Pierre already said this, but like he said it on, I don't know if it was a podcast or a post, but that my anoles do love Suriname cherry bushes, like Suriname cherries. They're like these little red fruits that grow out of a bush, and my animals love those things.
Really?
And those are really, really, really good, like really
Are
beneficial feeder.
those
I don't think
those
I know what
cherries?
they
Those
are, but
are
I'm gonna look.
yeah. Where do you get them from?
I just collect them; they grow here.
Okay, you got them local.
Yeah,
Okay,
local. They're actually pretty
nice.
good. They're a little bitter, but they're pretty good.
Yeah,
Hmm.
nice.
And
Check it
figs,
out.
they love figs.
I'm a dumb, right? Everything I keep loves figs too. I give them to my lychees. I get once in a while, bust open a fig and just give them the whole damn thing.
I love figs, so I get
Right.
it. Oh, they're so
I'm
good.
Italian, bro. Listen, we grow them everywhere. We grow figs like we grow rose bushes.
Yeah, no,
So let
figs
me
are great.
is there any because we're coming close to the end. I don't want to hold you too
Yeah.
much longer. I
No,
know
you're
you're
good. No, you're good.
okay.
You're good.
All
Yeah.
right. Is there any good communities for like? Well, actually, how is the no community?
I would say it's actually really good. We're a relatively small community, but I feel like the overall goal of our community is to help each other out, and we kind of we all we communicate and we share information rather than being gatekeepers
Oh,
and being like, oh, I do this, I'm the
awesome.
first to do it, I'm the only one that does it. I we just most of the Knoll community really just wants to see everybody succeed, and I totally abide by that 100%. You know, anyone that asks me a question, you don't have to be my customer if you want information from me. Anyone that messages me and is like, hey, I have this or I want to get this, like, what should I do? I answer anybody's question. And it's kind of the same way
Very
within the
cool.
NL community. We're a small, tight knit community, but we're a good group. And the best, like, if you want to get involved in the NL community, the best group is the Anoles group on Facebook. That's like the main group. I used to use Anolis breeders and enthusiasts, but that group kind of died off. So I pretty much post exclusively in the Anolis group. Uh, and that's where you can find a lot of I don't know if you would like say like the big players, that's where everyone
Mm.
is the most active. Yeah, no, it's a good community. I definitely like being a part of the Anole community more than I like being part of other communities because I have other stuff too.
Oh yeah.
Well, you got. I mean, it's a given, dude. If you look at the crested guy or the new cow world as a whole, if you were to ask me what the downfall is or the demise of the new cow world will be, it's the gatekeeping and the bashing. When you look at all these little budding, thriving, up and coming communities that are around some of these cool species like anoles and tokays and all these other things, these people are so cool with each other. Like everyone's like a friend. Everyone knows each other. Everyone's willing to help the next one win. You look at crested geckos and they're like, well, I don't know you. We don't need any more, and we're not doing. It's like who are you people? Like you're so
Yeah,
rude and like obnoxious. Like you could be talking to some 12-year-old kid that just wants to learn something. Like damn, be nice to people. Christ.
yeah. I don't think that what you were just talking about, like that's to me, that's not what herpetoculture is about.
No, it's not.
That's not what it's
It's
about to me.
not.
I just want to share my love for these animals with everybody and give everybody as good of
Yes.
information as I could possibly give.
Yes.
It's I want to see everybody win. It's not a competition to me.
That passion breeds passion. Like, and I say it all the time, I sound like a broken record, but we should want the reptile hobby to be like the cat and dog hobby, right? Like, we should all want it to be as big as possible. We should want reptiles in homes, no particular species, but we should want reptiles to be as acceptable as cats and dogs. Like, why this bickering and fighting and gatekeeping? None of that helps, the greater cause. Like, it
Yeah,
doesn't. Like,
I completely agree. I
there's no
completely agree.
reason for it. And like
Yeah,
you said, not being a customer. Hey, you don't gotta be my customer. If I have information that's gonna help you win, I'd be honored to give it to you. I'd be
yeah,
honored to give it to you. I mean, that's why we started this podcast. We were just tired of people gatekeeping. We wanted to start getting these amazing people with great information. We wanted to start making it more accessible. Like there's people out there that are willing to share this information. Just ask, just in again, to go back to the new cow world, some people like I've experienced like in a group won't ask me a question in a group, but they'll send me a message, which is fine, but they won't ask the question in the group because they don't want to get picked on. Like that's a real thing. Like you got to worried about what someone's going to say to you. Like
yeah.
that's
It's pretty
terrible,
wild.
man. That's terrible, man. It's terrible,
Yeah, and
terrible.
also just another side note, like you know, being a reptile breeder, it's like it's 20% can you breed the animals? And then it's the other 80% is, can you deal with the social aspect of being a reptile breeder? And my strong opinion on that is you will have better success marketing and selling your animals by just being a kind person.
Very true.
And by being an understanding and willing to share person, even if it doesn't mean you're going to get $1 from it.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%.
That's my opinion. That's my approach.
One of my go-to gecko guys, I'm a super loyal person. Once I find somebody that does good business and is like a good person, like I vow to give them all the money I spend. Not that it's right or I should explore other people, but it's just how I operate.
And I think that's how a lot of people go. You know, you just never.
He's gotten thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars from me just for answering questions before I ever kept these species. I'd ask a question and he'd volunteer to tell me, like, listen, you could do it this way, you could do it this way. Some people do it this way, but listen, if I were you, what I suggest is you try this. Like, he just like would go out of his way to be and it's not even like you have to go far out of your way to be a good person. It's so much easier to be a good person than it is to put the energy into being a dickhead. Like, it's just a fact, and he would. And for that reason, he'll get just about every dollar I spend with animals. There's 2 of them, but ironically, they're friends, so it's like, just being a good person and I'm a grown ass man that spends a lot of fucking money, man, and you will get all of my money just for being a good person,
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm lucky. Like I have the same, I have a lot of really loyal customers, and I'm always willing to provide them with whatever information they want. And also I'm lucky I occupy a niche that like not really anybody else does. So it's kind of a win for me. It's a win for me.
Yeah, you got the market.
You got a lot of things going for you, bud. You got a lot of things going for you. You're extremely intelligent, extremely bright. Your observations, your attention to detail are just you're very good at what you do, man. You fit the spot, man. If I were to buy a Anoles, honestly, like, and no offense, but I know there's some guys out there that have bigger names. I would come to you, man. I would come to you just for your personality and the way you handle yourself, the way you carry yourself. I would be totally confident and comfortable shopping with you, man.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and just one more thing. I'm just gonna shout out my friend here. If you want an Anole and it's something I don't have, always go to Armin at Herb Time. He is on the same wave as me 100%.
We had him on. Yep. We had him on.
That is the man. So if you ever need anything else, for Anole wise, that's the guy.
He is. He's got some.
Yeah.
There's another one, man.
Yeah.
All right. So we coming up to end, and I'm about to ask my closing question. I always ask it to everybody, but what have been your biggest failures in this hobby, and then what have you learned from those?
Sheesh. Okay. Well, everyone has a lot. Oh gosh.
You'd be surprised how many don't admit it.
I have to think. It's just a lot. I have to I'm thinking because there's a few different things. This is just like a general thing. Can you just repeat the second part of the question one time, please? You said, what are your biggest failures in the hobby,
and what have you learned from those failures?
Well, one of my biggest failures in the hobby is, and this is like an interesting thing to say, but is, I feel like in the past I've gotten way too caught up in just putting so much into the animals that I forget to take care of myself. So I don't know if that's a failure, but it's kind of just something that I've done and had to deal with in the past is I have so many animals and I just pour my soul into them. And I forget to take care of myself and nourish my personal relationships in my life. So if I learned something from that, it's, love your animals, take the best possible care of your animals, but don't forget that you need to take care of yourself too. And don't let the hobby become too much of a job, because if you let the hobby turn into if it's a hobby and it's something you should always enjoy. And once you get to the point where you're stressing and not enjoying the hobby, that, not enjoying the animals, that's when you gotta figure something out. So
I love that.
I feel the same way about social media.
Yeah. And then another one for me is, you know, be willing to listen and don't think you're the best all the time. And sit back and watch and listen, like, learn from others. And this was like early on in my career. I guess the career early on in my keeping, I feel like I didn't take enough advice or listen well enough. And I guess the moral of what I'm saying is, and just shut up and listen sometimes. Just shut up and listen.
That's perfect.
And
I like that.
one more is, don't rush. In the hobby, I
Take your
learned,
time with this stuff. Yeah,
don't freak out if you can't get an animal that minute. Don't blow your whole bank account. Be fiscal, and don't rush into things. Don't rush into projects. Keep just expect that things will work out, and don't try to rush breeding, and don't try to rush acquiring animals, because I don't know. It's just never rushing things just never works for me.
I dig it.
That's my.
All right. So my closing question for you is going to be: if someone were to keep reptiles for the first time, give me your pitch on anoles. Why should someone choose an anole over anything else that's offered in the hobby? What would your sales pitch be for anoles as pets?
You can get. They're just everything that you could want. If you're looking for something that's going to be really awesome in a like mostly display but very interactive terrarium, I mean they have everything that you could possibly want. If you like if I'm going to compare them to things, you get the beautiful, amazing color of a green, like a tree monitor, or you can get the color of a tree monitor without having a massive enclosure with like such an insane like setup for them. They don't get so big. You can have like the intelligence of any monitor or TID in a small package. You can, you have something that they're manageable, but they're not mindless. I guess that if it was a phrase, they're manageable, but they're not mindless. They offer so much, but they can be so little.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Nice.
Cool. I think they're a great, they should be on everybody's radar, man. They're a species of lizard that people should pay attention to. Beautiful animals, intelligent animals, definitely manageable husbandry. You can keep them in a million different ways, whether it be outdoors or smaller species in a glass terrarium in an apartment, or a dorm room. There's a species of anole for just about every lifestyle. Awesome. So where can everybody find you? What's the best way for people to purchase from you, ask questions from you? If any of our followers wanted to find you, get in touch with you, tell us real quick.
Okay, so you can find me. My main social media is at Crown Giant on Instagram. Like we were scrolling through, you saw my page. I also run the page Cameliolas. That's also like if you go on my Crown Giant page, you'll see that's linked in the bio. I have a morph market. My morph market is Crown Giant Anoles, but it's AJ Reptiles, and the main name on the account is my girlfriend's name. But my name's also there. So if you look up AJ Reptiles, or you go look in Anoles on Morph Market, you'll see all my ads. You can message me there if you're interested in purchases. I also respond really quickly to Facebook Messenger. Facebook Messenger, Instagram DM, Morph Market, pretty much for me. And on Facebook Messenger, I'm the same name I am here, Jon Asher. So
your morph market is what? Your morph market is under Crown Giants?
It's Crown Giant is like the title, but it's like the account name is AJ Reptile.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I've already put
check them out, guys.
So you
check him out, support him. Super great person, man. Super great human being. Follow him. Check his stuff out. If you're gonna buy animals, keep him on your radar.
Yeah, I still gotta, like Morph Market, you gotta send your ID picture in to get your account name changed, and my girlfriend made the account, so I just haven't done that.
All right.
No worries. You'll figure out which one is me. It's not that hard because I only have like 9 ads and they're all Anoles. So.
Oh yeah, I've saw them already. I was like, oh god damn it, I need to get some.
Yeah, for sure.
But definitely, it was a pleasure having you on, man. Your passion just bleeds out, man. Oh my god, like, dude,
it was.
Thank you very much.
Great episode.
Everything you were talking about, for real.
Yeah, I enjoyed this a lot. This is my first time being on a podcast, so
really
kind of like, I don't I don't do a lot of this kind of
Let's talk
stuff.
about some quick stuff.
Yeah. No, I this was totally a good experience and gave me a good outlook on
Something else you're good
podcasts.
at, man. Something
Yeah.
else you're good at. You
I
did
guess so.
perfect, man.
Yeah. If there's one thing I'm good at, it's talking about Anoles for a long time.
You should
Got a
start a
YouTube
channel,
page, right?
man. You should start
Yeah.
a YouTube channel on Anoles, man. Fill that void. You know, you could be like
Everyone tells me
Harmon's
Everyone tells me
dude.
that.
You
But
got a
'Cause
gift, man. I'm
I saw
telling
you
you,
on
and I don't tell
TV,
everybody. You have a
and
gift.
yeah.
You have a
I don't know.
gift. You have a talent.
I like, I'm happy to do things like this, but I don't really like putting myself in front of a video camera that much. But that's just me.
Trust me,
I
I feel
respect
the
that.
same
I
way
hear you.
about myself.
Maybe one day though. Maybe one day I'll change my mind.
All right.
Yes.
You may get a lot of requests after people see this.
Right.
Well, if it's requested enough, I will do it.
There you
Maybe.
go.
Everybody
Keep
hear
an
that,
open
right?
mind.
Maybe, possibly. Yeah. Well, guys,
Right.
it's been so excellent. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
John, go ahead and stay on real quick after I stop this, and then we'll talk about some other stuff, okay?
Yeah.
All right, everybody, have a great night. We'll talk to you next Sunday. Thanks. All right. So we're done. So, dude, thanks. That was awesome.